Georgia has all the necessary components to succeed. The European countries are asking you that, what about the reforms? Are you a country? Are you a state? What is Estonia? So it was really like putting Estonia on the map physically as well as politically, geographically, economically, in every sense. Georgia was also, or always, a fascinating place. I wouldn't say that it's a Wild West. I think Georgians are welcoming and they have made it really easy to invest in the country. What is important for Georgians, I think, is that to understand compromise, it's not a sign of weakness. Tere päevast, minu nimi on Rina Kaljurand, ma olen Eesti suursaadik Gruusias ja täna annan intervjuud sellisele meediaväljaandele nagu Sakartvelo Insight. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me and for showing interest in Estonia and the ambassador of Estonia. So I'm very grateful. I think this is a very relevant question because in my case, I am not a typical career diplomat. And indeed, I entered the foreign service. So let's say I started working at the MFA at the age of 18. It was 1993 when Estonia had just regained its independence, and our kind of state apparatus was about to be built up. So they were looking for young people who didn't have any Soviet, let's say, bureaucratic background, and they gave me a chance to study and work at the same time. So I entered the foreign service 93, and I stayed there for 4 years. I was working at the embassies in Stockholm and Oslo. And then I sort of moved on from there. I stayed in Sweden. I studied and graduated the Stockholm University. And then I started working for Sweden. I worked for SIDA for some years. So from 2003 and 2004, I worked in Ukraine. So it was a kind of a long way again to return. Let's say I took a 25-year break from MFA and diplomatic work. I stayed in Sweden for a long time. And then I returned to Estonia, and I started working at the Ministry of Defense. And after that, or during my stay at the MOD, we started to build up a think tank, the first ever proper think tank in Estonia, called International Center for Defense and Security. And I became the deputy director of this center and also a researcher of Nordic-Baltic security, our defense cooperation, but also Russian soft power. And as the center was organizing the biggest foreign and security policy conference first in Estonia, but in our region as well, the Lennart Meri conference, then I was involved in actually organizing this for almost 12 years. And I was director of this conference for 6 years. And after that, I was called back to the MFA. So after this long pause, and I was first working at the policy planning department, and then I was made an offer, actually, whether I would like to become an ambassador in Georgia. So this was a kind of surprise for me. So because I didn't go through all these stages that a career diplomat needs to go through. And in a way, it was difficult for me to make this decision, because I didn't feel that I was really ready or qualified. Although I had been working with foreign and security policy issues for all these years, I knew everybody in these circles, but I was not a ready diplomat. But I thought that, well, Georgia was also, or always, a fascinating place. I was always interested in South Caucasus, and I think that I'm attracted to a little bit more like to the places that are not ready yet. Because Western Europe is very much ready, and you cannot change much. So I thought that the challenges here would be more exciting, and I said yes. And when I arrived as an ambassador, my I think first experience was that well, this was something, it was not only representing a country, but it was also actually to introduce the mindset of my country. And maybe I did not do it in the most polished and diplomatic way, because I thought that as a think tanker you are very much free-minded and free-spoken, and I thought that maybe I was a little bit too free-spoken in the beginning. I said things in a way I thought them to be, and so I have learned a lot. Although I still think that we should be more direct in our conversations, and as a small country you can actually afford being more critical sometimes, or more appreciative sometimes, than the big countries can. So I have learned a lot, but I think that my background as a think tanker has also contributed in a different way to this position as an ambassador. It was a huge responsibility, but when you are very young, you probably you don't feel it in that way. You are excited, and you are ready to do whatever you are told to do or you are asked to do. And I think, as I didn't understand, I didn't know anything about diplomacy. I didn't know anything about international relations. And I think this saved me from this nervousness. I didn't feel that there was anything wrong. But thank God, when I started working at the Estonian embassy in Stockholm in 1995, then at this time our ambassador, although he was also very young, he was more experienced. He had been working there at the Estonian Institute, and I learned very much from him. And I will always remember the words that he told us as young, let's say, staff, that, you know, Estonia is nothing more than you are. You are Estonia from head to toe. There's nothing more. So whatever you do, whatever you say, this is Estonia for the other people. And this put some kind of responsibility on my shoulders, that I suddenly understood that, well, you know, this position, or this whatever work I do, it has a much bigger meaning than just as maybe a teenager would normally think. So, and it also gave me a sort of pride, or I was proud of actually representing my country at this age. But it also, sort of added this dimension of seriosity to the whole thing. It was fun. I mean, we were a bunch of young people. I was 18, somebody was 19, somebody was 22. We had no clue, but he kept us all sort of in line or under control, in the sense that we did it responsibly. I think Georgia has all the necessary components to succeed. It is just maybe we should keep in mind that the South Caucasus trio, for example, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, it is not the same as the Baltic Trio, and I would not make that comparison because it would be unfair to Georgia, because your geopolitical location and geographical location is so much more complicated, and the internal developments of your country were somewhat disrupted by the war in Abkhazia, then also the Russian aggression in 2008. We have been lucky not to have had these kinds of disruptions that have had a negative impact on our development. And we are a small society. Our population is only 1.3 million. But also I think that our neighborhood, besides one country, has been very supportive. So we have been saved by very much economically, politically, strategically by our closest neighbors. And the sort of that we are close to Europe. We are pretty much actually on the verge of Europe. So it helped us to develop very in a sort of very stable way. We made a decision early on in the 90s that the only security guarantees for Estonia would be membership in the EU and NATO, and step by step we moved towards this direction. Although we had absolutely no guarantees in the beginning that we were expected in NATO or EU, it was quite the other way around. We got very clear messages that you are not welcome, as you are not really part of the Western world. We don't know who you are. And I think that sometimes I hear that in Georgia that you had it so much easier to become members of EU and NATO. In a way, yes, but on the other hand, it was not that much easier, because the challenges were completely different at that time. While maybe the European countries are asking you that, what about the reforms? You have not finalized the different kind of reforms in different sectors. But the questions we were asked at that time were, are you a country? Are you a state? What is Estonia? What do you mean? Do you have your own language? Do you have your own culture? It was much more primitive. So it was really like putting Estonia on the map physically, as well as politically, geographically, economically, in every sense. Today, there is no doubt that we are accepted, of course, respected as a kind of full-fledged country. But in the 90s, this was not so easy. So, and then we decided early on that we will have to really to give maximum and even more, not 100%, but 120%, so that nobody can say that you have not done enough. And this is the mentality also I have, and my colleagues as well, Estonians, have been trying to give to Georgians during all these years. I mean, we have been very supportive of Georgian Euro integration and Euro-Atlantic integration for many years, and we have been the biggest supporters of your integration process. But at the same time, as we have gone through the same trajectory, we know that you have to do more than expected in order to get that kind of respect. And for example, I see maybe that the times have changed as well, and the whole kind of geopolitical situation has changed. But I see that Georgian politicians are questioning the recommendations or decisions or advice of European Commission much more than we did. We really took it as a policy. Okay, we were given these recommendations. We never questioned whether these were bad or good. We knew that we needed to do that, despite whatever. But here I see that there is much more of this cherry picking. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not really helpful. So this is the advice we can give from inside, having gone through exactly the same process. And maybe the difference between the well-established older democracies in Europe, like France or Germany or even the Netherlands, they know how things should be, but they don't necessarily know how to get there. While I think the added value of the Baltic experience is that we know how things should be, but we also know how to get there. So we can give you advice on the road. It is difficult to put finger on just one factor, one thing that decides that. I think that there have historically been very good personal interactions between our people, and people decide actually the perception of a country. And during the Soviet times, when Estonians traveled to Suhumi and Batumi to have holidays, and when Georgians traveled to the Baltic states, to Tallinn, for example, that they saw that was exotic for them. There are many relationships that are still alive today. I mean, Estonians have many friends among Georgians, and Georgians, almost every Georgian knows somebody in Estonia. So first of all, it's people. Then I think it is the relevance of our experience in Georgia. As I said previously, we have gone through the same steps, the same challenges. And also the trust in our model or in our experience. I'm sure there are many perfect and very well-functioning models of economy or social welfare or education, but we have been lucky enough to enjoy the trust of Georgian people, Georgian government in many of our models. So I think it is trust, good relations, and relevant experience. This is the basis for everything else. And then you can combine and maybe with other elements from other models. But we are especially proud of, for example, having revised and also helped to build a new educational strategy of Georgia, and Estonian curriculum that we are using in our schools today has been implemented in 100 public schools in Georgia, because this is it has proven to be a very good and successful model, and we are performing well in international average tests, and it has shown that it is also successful here. This is exactly the core of our educational model. First of all, it's child-centered. It takes into account the characteristics of every single child and tries to bring out the strength in every person. For example, if you are very good in mathematics, then you have the opportunity to focus more on this. And when you are good in literature or in these maybe some natural sciences or biology, or you are interested in nature or music, so you are more free to develop these features in your character, and there is no pressure to be equally good in everything. And you can actually what is good in Estonia is that all the schools have quite a lot of independence in deciding what kind of and how they teach the curriculum. Whether they do it in, I don't know, starting from the physical environment and ending in more maybe substance matter, that maybe some students are told to do or focus on certain subjects, and the others are told to focus on other subjects. And teachers are more like tutors who support the process. Plus, another thing is that we have the interdisciplinary approach in most of the schools, where you, for example, you learn several subjects together. You read an Estonian text, which is sort of the Estonian language lesson, and at the same time this text is about ecology or dealing with some mathematical problems. Or when you, for example, learn chemistry or physics, then you can go out and do the things and actually experience or test something already in a practical form. And now they are also developing the schools, which is still an initial stage, but we already have these kind of schools that are called smart schools. For example, you have an auditorium, and depending on the number of pupils in the auditorium, this room itself measures the amount of CO2. So this is a kind of the physical and chemistry and all this together. And you have solar panels, and you have, so it is more fun, and it is also about to make it more interesting for children to understand what all these subjects are all about. Because if it's only textbook physics or textbook chemistry, I mean, it remains very abstract. Because I come from a Soviet school. It was a very old-fashioned system. And now, when my daughter is going to school, I mean, I understand much better what she is doing, what I ever understood at that time. So now I'm learning together with her what certain things actually meant, and that's a positive side. So this is exactly, and also we try to combine. I mean, the ministries are working together in order to identify the needs of labor market, and not only Estonian labor market, but the international labor market. So that actually when you graduate from the upper secondary school, then you already or more or less know which direction you are going. You have been able to choose that path several years ago. And now you are just doing some exams in order to enter universities in Estonia or anywhere. And actually the percentage of our students being accepted in international universities is quite high. So this is the mentality we also want to bring here. Because in Georgia it is the similar problem. Schools are not really preparing students for exams, graduate exams or entrance exams to universities. So it's a long process, but it works. Georgia is one of the priority countries when it comes to our development cooperation. It has been so for many years already. Now the situation has changed a little bit. I mean, it hasn't. Georgia is still a priority country, but because of the war going on in Ukraine, also we have reallocated some of our resources, and Ukraine gets more attention, which is quite obvious and understandable. But we are still we are doing a lot in sphere of education in different fields. So this is, let's say that education is our flagship. But it is also about vulnerable groups in society. We are supporting women's shelters, women entrepreneurship. For example, we have been training women in the IDP settlements and about 90 or up to 100 women have got this training, and they have started their own small businesses, and some of them have become very successful, so we are happy about that. Then also when it comes to, for example, well, economic system, yes, we are doing a little bit less in the field of economy now, but we did quite a lot previously. And when it came to, for example, the investment tax, that when a company makes profit and invests this profit into development of the business, then there is no tax obligation. So this is an Estonian model that Georgia has taken over. Then we have also other areas like search and rescue. We are, for example, we have been introducing the drones that help to detect forest fires, especially in areas like Borjomi, or where these fires are more common. But also many different other areas. One of our biggest bilateral projects now has been the opening of the sort of a social health center, or, well, in Estonia it is called Children's House, that has been created after the Parnahus model. And here it has a different name, but it is also created after Parnahus model. And what this model is that this is a center where children who have been abused or, physically in different ways, they can go, and everything is under the same roof. You have doctors, you have forensic services, you have lawyers, you have police. It is all in one and the same center. It's a very child-friendly environment. It has special colors on the walls. There are toys. It's kind of as friendly place as possible after a trauma that a child has gone through, for example. And instead of having to travel long ways, or maybe sometimes that travel takes one day and you can visit only police, or you can only go to a lawyer, or you can only go to a doctor and back home. And instead of re-traumatizing this child, she can or he can come to the center, spend a day, and actually the authorities get all the necessary information. So, and then we have been training the personnel working at the center, and also we have been training the law enforcement agencies and staff there, plus 300 judges who at the end of the day need to make a decision in these very difficult and stigmatized cases sometimes. And now we are working on setting up the second center, hopefully in Kutaisi, to cover the western part of Georgia. So these are, it's huge, it's very time consuming, and it's also quite an expensive project, but we are glad that we have been able to introduce this model in Georgia, where there is a need. Well, I would say that Georgia has done quite a lot when it comes to reforms. And well, these 12 recommendations are indeed important in a way that these are very crucial points that need to be fulfilled. Many of them have already been addressed in different manners, and there are still some of those who need more attention. Well, obviously, two of these recommendations about depolarization and de-oligarchization, these are the most difficult ones to address. It is really up to Georgian government to decide what to do about them. I know that, well, depolarization is something that I think Not even a government can really. This is not something you can do, writing it down on the paper and okay, say now this is solved. It's a much bigger and broader and very complicated and complex issue, because it needs some sort of almost like civil contract of the whole nation, or it is, you need to compromise. You need to learn to compromise. I think this is also some kind of maybe a question of political culture or culture in general. That it's a pride from both sides. Nobody wants to come down from their high horses, and it is also the sort of what is important for Georgians, I think, is that to understand that whenever they need to compromise, it's not a sign of weakness, because in the European Union there are a lot of discussions, a lot of debates, negotiations going on all the time. We are 27 members, and if you cannot agree on some very basic principles at home, how can you ever imagine finding a compromise with 27 different countries? So this is something I think it comes with political maturity, or in the countries where there are coalition governments, it's easier to practice, because first you need to find these compromises with your coalition partners, and then you go on. But when it comes to other issues, then of course, yes, the de-oligarchization law, although this was not actually a requirement of the European Commission, that you need this law in order to overcome it, because you didn't actually, or Georgia didn't actually need to adapt this law. I think it was basically, in other words, it was fight with corruption on the highest level. And you can have different mechanisms. If all the anti-corruption kind of mechanisms are in place and working, there's no need for such a law. But if there are some gaps here and there, then, but these general laws that cover everything are very seldom a solution to a problem, exactly like this foreign agents law. It was very general, and the problem with laws that are so generic are that they are not targeting actually those who are guilty ones. They are targeting everybody, which creates this enormous mistrust in the society. And also all the societies, not only Georgia, are facing these, let's so-called agents, or it's not agents, but there are influences. But there are other ways to deal with these influences as well. It's, for example, one of the arguments that I've heard many times using is that they are not, that the NGOs do not have to declare their incomes, they don't have to declare their outputs, they are not, well, then create a law that makes them to declare incomes and also to review their activities afterwards. And then you have other mechanisms that control that kind of a thing, whether actually their activity is corresponding to the I don't know, their strategy or agenda, or whether it's harmful for the society or not. Because you have auditors, you have revenue service, and you have your security authorities who can separately deal with these kind of questions. You don't need an overall generic law that creates even more polarization, even more distrust against everybody. And from our perspective, this was a little bit also offensive towards us as donors, because we are all donors. And when I support an NGO, for example, a smaller NGO somewhere, it's very easy to come up to 20% of budget of this small NGO, because their budget is non-existent, basically. And this makes this NGO a foreign agent and me as an influencer, although I have absolutely no desire or no wish to undermine the sovereignty or independence of Georgian state. So yes, I think there are, I can understand this sort of rush to show the result, but sometimes it's better to do nothing, to just let it be, and to go on kind of step by step, instead of just showing and ticking the boxes without any real substance. We don't have that much of that kind of business interaction, unfortunately. Could be much more, and hopefully it will be more in the future. But now, for us, it is a little bit risky. I can understand our entrepreneurs, because small businesses cannot afford taking bigger risks. Coming to Georgia and, for example, trying to establish a company, or they often face a different kind of business mentality, different business or culture, and sometimes they invest and they lose. And for a small business, it means that they have lost a lot, so they don't take this risk. I wouldn't say that it's a Wild West. I think Georgians are welcoming, and they have made it really easy to invest in the country. But then there's a question: what happens after the investments are in place, and all this legislation, how to get things done. And so I think this is a little bit of an unknown area for Estonian entrepreneurs, although we have entrepreneurs here as well. And one of our biggest investments is that Tbilisi Hills Golf and Residences, and there's sort of the golfing village in Tbilisi. So I think if you have a big investment like this, then you can bear with the risks as well, because you are strong enough to survive. But I think there is a lot of potential, and we have some ideas in the pipeline, which I cannot talk about yet, but it is improving step by step. But I think that many Estonians have come here, they have tried it, they have tested, and at some point they have left. So our task is to make them come here, to attract them, and to help them stay. And this means that that all the Georgian authorities should also be as helpful as possible to support smaller entrepreneurs, for example. With sometimes they are fighting with very, very kind of basic issues and basic problems, that there is no road to somewhere, or like we have tea growers in Kutaisi. There is an Estonian group of friends who have they have rehabilitated 3 tree plantations, and they are growing this ecologically pure tea. So it's but they are tackling with some problems, and for years and years and years, and it's just So I think we can all do everything in our power to help this to change, and there is potential, but there's still a lot of worrisome signs. Yes, Estonians are interested in Georgia, and there's a lot of tourism coming towards this direction. What is interesting for Estonians is the mountains and the sea. okay, we have sea in Estonia too, we don't have mountains. So a lot of hikers, a lot of groups who go hiking in different areas are coming, and a lot of people are coming to Batumi, but also a lot of people are coming to Tbilisi and to discover, well, the old town, but also the culture. And of course, from Tbilisi, it's easy to get to Kakheti and this sort of close by areas. And this is very, very sort of, this is an active flow. So we would like to have it the other way as well. I mean, Georgians are not going to Estonia in masses to discover what the Baltics or what Estonia has to offer, but I think this should also change, because it should be a two-way kind of attraction. Even if our weather is not as good as yours, and it's not that warm, and our sea is never warming up enough so that southern people would feel comfortable. But I think we have many other things. We have a lot of pure nature, a lot of also tracks to hike in the forest. We have, I mean, 50% of our territory is covered by forest. We have these wetlands or swamps that are really interesting. We have islands. We have 1,500 islands, which people don't really know about, and there are some, I mean, around 30 islands are populated as well, and there are wonderful spas and beaches and a lot of culture, and then we have the southern part that is a little bit more hilly. So there is a lot of diversity that I think Georgians do not know anything about. It's like this coastal Swedes are living along the western coast and some of the islands, and they have left their cultural traces everywhere, while we have these staroverniki, these old believers who come from Russia. They were populating the southern part of Estonia. So this is a completely different culture, but also very interesting. Around 100 students study in Estonia every year, or start studying, or there are these longer term courses, shorter courses. School of Diplomacy it's very popular, but yes, we have quite a huge alumni here in Georgia. Yes, I have traveled enough. I would like to travel more, but the work is keeping me here, and as I'm also covering Armenia, so I need to commute to Armenia quite often. I came from Armenia just yesterday, but what I like the most are the mountains as well. I like hiking in the mountains, and one of my aims was to go up to Kaspegi, so I did that last summer, and nature is what I'm attracted to the most. But I really like Kutaisi, and I like Batumi as well. They're completely different. Kakheti is, of course, with all these wine chateaus and this culture as well. It is very special. But yes, the Caucasus Mountains and Kaspegi, and this is my, I think, favorite. I haven't been to Svaneti yet, but I am planning to. So I have covered everything. I cannot say that anything was shocking for me, because I had an idea of Georgia before I came here. I was cooperating with Georgians already earlier, and I had been here once, but also that during the Soviet times, I think we had some sort of stereotypes of each other already at that time, so we knew what to expect. And what was maybe the most surprising for me was the interaction or this dynamics of relationships between Georgians, Armenians and Azerbaijanis. I had a little bit of different understanding of how this would look like, and when I came here it was a shock that this was not the case, what I had imagined in my head. So I think the regional dynamic in general is something that every ambassador coming here needs to sort of understand in a better way. But I had lived in Ukraine before. There are many similar elements. Many things are still here from Soviet times, so these are not shocking or strange. We had it in the same way, or some of the mentality was very similar. But yeah, nothing shocking, but many pleasant things that you have, that you are really very outwards, and you are extroverts, in contrast to Estonians who hardly say a word when not necessary. Also, the supra culture is of course something we don't have. It can be a little bit uncomfortable in the beginning with all the toasts and things, because you don't know exactly what to say and what to start with, and everybody's expecting. So I think the first supras I couldn't eat anything because I was so nervous because of these toasts. And overall, this very warm welcoming of all the guests or strangers, so that you happen to walk on the streets and you happen to just ask something, and they actually give you the whole world. They give you, they invite you somewhere, or they explain something, and also Estonians are very warmly welcomed. I understand that whenever I say I come from Estonia, oh, you are Estonians, we love Estonians. So it is very easy to be in Georgia as an Estonian. It is still very, and it's very nice feeling. So I hope that Georgians would feel the same in Estonia, wherever they walk around. So this is, well, my perception was that as Armenia and Georgia are Christian countries, there would be more trust towards each other. And as Azerbaijan is, well, half secular, half a Muslim country, maybe culturally it would be, although the whole region is very much interacted or somehow intertwined with each other, culturally, economically, politically. What I discovered was that, and I thought that there was a lot of interaction between Georgians and Armenians, and this is not the case. Many Georgians have never been to Armenia, they have never been to Yerevan, they have no kind of idea what this is all about, but they have a lot of interaction with Azeris, and they like to go there, they like to travel there, and they trust Azeri friends more than Armenian friends. This was a kind of a surprise to me that I didn't really understand. Well, I think if Georgia wants to become some sort of okay, let's not even say mediator, because this is a huge responsibility, and to become a mediator, it also requires resources and that kind of a credit, the political credit and all that, which I think Georgia doesn't have at the moment. But as a facilitator, as this neutral ground in between, yes, they have potential. But there are, at the moment, too many factors. Like Turkey, Russia, Iran, all want their part, let's say. They wouldn't allow Georgia to be an independent facilitator. But also I think that Georgia would, in this case, really need to take into account the interests of both Armenians and Azerbaijani, because there is a strategic partnership with Turkey and Azerbaijan, while with Armenia there are friendly relations. So I think they would really need to maybe put more effort into developing more relations with Armenians, and then it can happen, because these three countries would win so much from cooperation. There is such a huge potential, but maybe now it's not the right time, but hopefully in the future the time will come, because that kind of cooperation would be such a huge deterrence factor in itself, in security-wise. I would like to see Georgia as a strong, independent country with an independent economy, huge European orientation, which doesn't exclude interaction with northern neighbor, whenever northern neighbor is worth that kind of interaction. Again, I think now we have to do everything to stop this war machine. I would like to see Georgia, well, maybe as a member of the European Union, with its own special character, but still following the European rules, European values. Because if you are a member of a club, you need to follow the rules of the club, but still to preserve its uniqueness. Because, well, this is what we all want, and this is what we all are as well. I mean, we all think that we are unique, but the strength of the European Union is that it preserves our uniqueness by these rules, by these same standards. And this gives us the security and safety and prosperity. And if we all follow these rules, we can all, preserve our uniqueness and our language and our culture. Nothing is taken away from us by being a member. So this is what I also wish for Georgia. Just remain yourself, but become European as well. It is the same as for all the diplomats, that you need to present your interests, but you also need to understand the other's interests. You have to be humble, I think, but at the same time clear enough. You can never go and demand or want or say that you need to give me, or I deserve, or this is very often the language I hear here and there. Well, it is a reciprocity, really. Whenever you go somewhere, talk to your colleagues, your partners, then you have to keep in mind that they also have their interests. You have yours, they have yours, and you need to find that point that actually unites you or brings your interests together. So yes, you need to be aware of so many nuances. So experience, learning, everything is of use. And for example, young Estonian diplomats who start their careers right after universities, I always say that okay, you can start here, then take a break, go out, see the world, work in other businesses, work in private sector, work in think tank sector, go and work in other ministries, so that you would get an idea that there is a life beside the Minister of Foreign Affairs, because this can become a bubble and it lives a life of its own, which is not necessarily useful for your future career. Because in order to get the broader view and especially this kind of feeling of humbleness, or so that you don't know everything just because you are a diplomat. it gives a lot. It really helps a lot in this position. So as many experiences from different fields as possible.